I got a smudge on my TV now. That's weird. Anyway, so I watched the majority of the Batman films. This includes, I say majority. I only watched one animated film. I didn't watch the silent film. Didn't really care to. I watched 12 in total. This obviously basically includes the 66 film all the way through to The Batman. And realistically, I kind of wanted to do my own personal ranking. I hadn't seen all of them for a long time. And for the most part, I've watched them all at least once, at most twice. The only ones I haven't seen more than once is The Mask of the Phantasm. Outside of that, I've seen all of them twice, including The Batman, which I saw on 2 separate screenings, only because I had 2 different friends who wanted to see it. I had my mate Guy wanted to see it on opening night, so I was like, alright, sure, we'll go. And then I watched that with my brother as well. And then my partner and my other friends wanted to see it the next week, so we'd already planned for that one. So I figured, sure, why not? I'll watch it twice. For the most part, I've got my letterbox ranking from 12 to 1. These are what I think are the best of the Batman films. For me, it varies from enjoyability, what I quantify as a good Batman story, what I quantify as a good depiction of Batman, how entertaining the film is, if it's actually enjoyable to watch, even if it qualifies as a better Batman film than other Batman films. I do have some kind of a delineation as to what I think makes a good Batman film. I plan to kind of explore that potentially in a later video, if not the next one I film after this. There's a lot of things that, you've got to quantify. I wish I would break down my list to some degree, but I haven't really explored too much into my list. But, of course, what makes a good Batman film? You've got your basics, which is the good suit, a good action film, a good Batmobile, and a bearable Bruce Wayne. Because Bruce Wayne's not always the most entertaining guy to watch. But as long as he has at least some kind of a conflict, whether it is a depiction of his, trauma from the loss of his parents, whether that's reflected in other characters or in himself, something like that, rather than him just being rich bachelor man, Then you've got elements of Bruce Wayne. He's got to be, I guess, handsome and clever. Subtly still Batman with the face of Bruce Wayne, because of course the classic notation that Batman is what Bruce Wayne actually is, and Bruce Wayne is the mask that he wears. He has to be interesting, not just a pretty face. So, he's your main character. It would be nice if he was actually interesting as a guy, usually. What else do we got? Sometimes a romantic interest to reflect or combat his Batman nature. So usually, most films utilize a romantic interest for Batman to, basically to contrast him with being Batman. Whether you've got all the girls the Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight films dates, but of course his main interest is Rachel. And she's a contrast between, he can't live a life as Batman if he wants to be with her kind of deal. And that's basically what most of these love interest things are like, where he has the inner conflict of, I can't remain Batman if I want to be with this girl, which is kind of a constant conflict with Batman. And I think that's basically why he never settles down, unless you get some comic depictions where, he marries Catwoman or some shit. Then, of course, you've got your depiction of Batman. You've got the exploration of moral values and ideology, aka why the hell does he fight crime? Usually, it's obviously a depiction of trauma. That's the basis of Batman as a whole. But obviously, he has a conflict of interest, usually with the police to some degree, where he has his own methods of how to fight crime. And this can be depicted very, very differently. It could be, I'm helping the police, but they don't like me, or I'm helping the police and they do like me, or I'm just killing people because it's the Zack Snyder films. It depends. Sometimes it's a certain length as to what Batman has himself actually gone through, whether he just wants to be a detective dressed up like a bat to spike fear to reduce crime, or he's just a vigilante and he just wants to kick people in the butt. Maybe. Depends. Then you've got use of parents as a reflection of his psychology, not just an origin story. I know a lot of people hate when they have to rewatch the origin story of Batman. And in all fairness, given how many on-screen depictions we've had of him, I'm thinking of I guess 4 movies currently. 89, which actually focuses some part of its plot on his actual, well, a good portion of it to some degree, on his parents' death. You've got Batman Begins, which of course starts with his parents' death. You've got The Batman, which his parents' death isn't really a part of it, but it is integral to a part of the plot. So I will be kind of maybe spoilers for The Batman, but I don't really know how much of spoilers realistically. And then even the Lego Batman film, it uses it as a reflection of trauma. It does vaguely have look, it's him taking a selfie, which doesn't make any sense, because why would he be taking selfie 20 years before selfies were a thing? But at the same time, it's meant to be a joke. That movie's a comedy. Then you've got fear factor / presence. So as Batman, does he have presence, or does he just look like a cartoon character? So that'll be a really big one, especially when you get to the later, the Schumacher films. And, well, basically, kind of the Nolan films, but we'll get into that. Then, of course, you've got gadgets, costume, vehicles, and the Batcave. So these are all contributing elements as to what, from iconography makes Batman, Batman. But, of course, there is obviously the thematic depth of the character. Because, of course, yeah, it seems like a big thing these days to talk about your trauma, but realistically, Batman has some heavy shit trauma, and the only time he doesn't really discuss that is basically in the 66 version, where he's just a guy who helps the cops. He's dressed like a bat. Kind of. It's goofy, so it doesn't really matter. Then, of course, you've got your villains, which usually the best of them are a reflection of Batman through either strength or ideology. The best of these is basically Bane as a version of strength and the Joker as a version of ideology through chaos, where Batman usually likes restraint and order. It's pretty obvious shit, but at the same time he does have quite a grouping of villains that are all different extensions of himself, usually. And of course, whether they're iconic or not, through fear factor or performance. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Arnold Schwarzenegger's iconic, but he ain't scary. Then, of course, you've got setting. Gotham needs to be dark and dangerous. It needs to be characterized and adds to the dynamic of Batman and the villains. Now, to some degree, we've had a various ton of different Gothams, from dark and brooding and moody and to gothic, to the elements of it's just a modern version of New York, So, or it's like San Francisco, I think. Where the hell is 66 set? I don't know. It's got docks and shit. I mean, of course, I understand New York is surrounded by water, but it's a different kind of dock. Anyway, like a harbour. Anyway, and then of course you got your side characters. So that would be like having a good Alfred, having a good Robin, arguably Batgirl and Jim Gordon and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't really dive too much into those, because even some of the movie depictions aren't overly phenomenal. You're basically down to a good Jim Gordon and a good Alfred. So either way, I'll be delving into a later video talking about all of those kind of stuff and how I delineate between each film and what I think really perfects each formula. Or I just won't bother with that video, let's be honest. Maybe no one will give a shit. So I just wanted to at least do my ranking. So I guess I'll just start with number 12. What do I think is the number 12 on my ranking of Batman films? Unfortunately for me, it's The Dark Knight Rises. God, I almost tripped myself up there. For me, The Dark Knight Rises is a very long, kind of dull film. I did used to like it when I originally was watching it as a kid, but, well, teenager, I guess, of course. This is 2012. But it never really grabs me that much. It has some good set pieces. Bane is pretty good, but for the most part, it doesn't really interest me too much as even a Batman film. The Nolan films have a distinction with how they do Batman. From Batman Begins, he's basically a ninja, but he has presence, at least for the most part. By The Dark Knight, he's more of kind of an action hero rather than Batman. He uses the Batman facade, obviously, because it's Batman. But yeah, by The Dark Knight, I don't know. It doesn't really flow much as a film for me. I don't really look at it too much of what can it be better off as a Batman film. But realistically, I don't really care as much for the film. It's mostly for me struggles because it's long and kind of dull. yeah, I could fall asleep during it, kind of deal. It, again, has some good action scenes and Bane's good, but I don't really care much for Batman in the film. And Catwoman's fine. She's not the best Catwoman we've had, thank God, but she's not the worst either, thank God. Anyway, I always say that, and I totally forget about the '66 Catwoman. She's great. Anyway, next up we have Batman Forever. For me, Batman Forever, though arguably, yes, better of a film than Batman and Robin, for me, especially on rewatching them all this time around, Batman Forever just is too much of a conflict of interest. It's trying to be like the kind of gothic Batman film of Batman and Robin Batman Returns and Batman '89, but it's also still trying to be a bit goofier, a bit kid friendly and whatever. It's not as dark, and to some elements, Batman in it is fine. He has a very sexy love interest, which is fine, and I understand the whole element of she kind of has a kink for him, but mostly because of people in masks. But then, like, they're using that as like a contrast between him and his like previous love interest, and the love interest part is fine. The Two-Face, I don't care for. I've always liked Two-Face as a character. I do not think Tommy Lee Jones plays a good Two-Face. His makeup is iconic, sure, but his character is way too over the top, and it's just a bit much. Doesn't really suit the style of the film. The Riddler, on the other hand, is fantastic, and even Drew Barrymore is great. So Jim Carrey's Riddler, sure, very cartoony, but at the same time, he works for what the cartoony part of the film wants to be. I don't think Bruce Wayne is... I mean, Bruce Wayne's actually pretty fine in the film. Val Kilmer plays a decent Bruce Wayne. Especially if you watch like some of the deleted scenes where he has the whole thematic arc of like him like trying to figure out if he should be Batman and like conflicting with what happened with his parents and everything, and he has that whole Batcave thing with the giant bat, symbolism and stuff really should have been left in the film. That would have made it a better film, because I like how this film tries to explore more of like his conflict with like him being Bruce Wayne, being Batman, why he's like this, and can he be both? Obviously he realizes it can, but the film tries to be more goofy, so it kind of breezes over that. The Robin part, fine. Robin is decent in the film. You've got your origin story for him, which is not bad. I do like how they have the cute, goofy costumes. And then they give him a costume, which... not great. Very codpiece, anyway. And I don't even... you don't even hardly realise that there's bat nipples in this one. So, that's a thing. But... yeah, the Batmobile's alright. Batcave is decent. It's, I think, because I love the '89 and Returns Batmobile, I don't mind the Forever Batmobile. I don't really remember what the Batman and Robin Forever Batmobile looks like, though, let's be honest. I don't really think it matters. Maybe I should look it up. Mobile, Batman and Robin. Oh, it looks like crap. I mean, it's not bad. Jesus, it's just very, very weird, isn't it? Okay, I'll be honest. I guess the Batman and Robin one is a better Batmobile, because the Batman Forever one it's very cartoony. It's so blue, all neon and shit. It's so weird. Alright, I think it looks more stylized, because it's got all the blue lights that come out of it, but still. But as an overall for the plot, it's just, for me, it's too messy of a film. It's trying to have this really interesting dialogue about Bruce Wayne's trauma and him trying to figure out if he should be Batman. But then, and if he is doing good for the city, given how no matter how long he's been around, there's still been these crazy-ass villains. And that's mostly because, of course, like, Two-Face blames Batman for why he's like what he is. So, it is what it is. But as an overall, it's an okay film. It's, again... a bit cartoony, but if it kind of works in that element. But it also kind of works in that serious element, but it doesn't gel perfectly together. It's very big on ideas, very big on gothic nature. The CGI isn't perfect in the film either, but I do like the expansion of how the city is like really weird. All the giant statues and shit. It has a lot of special effects in it that just don't age well. It's got some pluses and minuses all around the picture, basically. But so far, like, I have star ratings for my film, so I'd given The Dark Knight Rises 3 stars. So it doesn't seem that bad, especially given I gave Batman Forever and Batman and Robin 2.5 stars each. For different reasons, though. Like, because in the end, Batman Forever is an okay film. It suffers from not being able to fully flesh out its ideas, especially of its depiction of Batman and whether, Bruce Wayne should remain as Batman. I also hate the fact that he leaves his lips ajar most of the time. It's really weird and really annoying. He doesn't feel like Batman when he does that. He's just but in a kind of sensual way. I don't like it. It's not great. Anyway, Batman and Robin is my next one, so number 10 on the list. Batman and Robin is objectively a worse film. But subjectively, because it's more of a cartoon, it wholeheartedly goes hammy cartoon bullshit, I kind of like it more. It was just much more fun to watch for me, and I watched these two back to back, and I was really tired by the end of watching Batman Forever, but then Batman and Robin was like, hey, hey, Batman, we got this guy, he calls himself Mr. Freeze. It's just so stupid, I love it. Obviously you got the dumbass fucking ice puns, you got sexy ass fucking Poison Ivy, you got what the fuck is Bane in this movie? This movie is pure cartoon, but at the same time, I also grew up with the 60s TV show, and I loved that show. I've got a whole Batman selection up here, which includes the animated series from the 90s. It has all the 90s films. It has the original TV show, and I've even got the Batman the movie on DVD over here. I don't know if you can get Batman the movie on Blu-ray yet. So, as it goes, I have every Batman film on physical, basically. Except for, obviously, The Batman hasn't come out yet. So, Batman and Robin, George Clooney just plays George Clooney, so he doesn't really have much of a Bruce Wayne, but he's not boring. He's just a dude. Robin is there. They've got some weird costumes. Obviously, it's all for merchandising and stuff. Mr. Freeze is iconic. The fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger has a whole shaved head and it's just got that blue crystallish ice-like makeup is great. It's did the production design. This film goes all out, and I really like how they depict the city in this one. They still use a lot of CGI, but it's gotten better between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. It just has a better feel in the movie for me. I don't know what the hell it is, but I just really like the look of Gotham in this film. Obviously, it's a worse Batman film, but at the same time, it's a cartoon, and to some degree, you can also look at it Batman's not always a dark and brooding character. He does have cartoonish interpretations, from literal cartoons to actual comic books that were in the 60s that were very cartoonish, and that was more or less the inspiration for the film. And I get it, and Alicia Silverstone's terrible in this movie. She's what the fuck is she doing in this movie? I don't have any dislike with the blatant homoerotica of these films, by the way. I think that kind of just adds to kind of the campiness of it all. It's just, fuck it, if it's going to be colourful, it's the 90s, it's going to be gay, So let's just live with it, and not live with it, but embrace it, So, to be fair, Josh Schumacher was gay, so it makes a lot of fucking sense. But I always liked it. I always appealed to those films. I always loved them as a kid because they were dumb as shit, and just fun because they're for kids, So then you've got your next one. It's really hard to defend those films, but it's also I don't know, you got to look at it in a certain point of view that if Batman Forever had either stuck really strongly with its brooding elements, with the whole or maybe just at least fully realize itself with its reflection of Batman and who he is, it probably would have just been a bit better of a film for me. But because they deleted a few of those scenes, the film's a bit too messy, and Two-Face is just yuck. Next, I have number 9, Batman Begins. I gave this film 3.5 stars. I've always liked this film. It's probably, my friend argues it's the strongest screenplay of the trilogy, which is fair enough. It's a very solid film. It's a good Batman origin film. When my girlfriend wanted to watch the Batman, she wanted to at least watch some Batman films to kind of get some idea of what he's like. So I showed her the Dark Knight trilogy, and both of us did not care for Dark Knight Rises, but she was the one who wanted to watch it. And to be fair, those films, they've got their own take. I do like how Batman Begins depicts itself color grading wise, it's a bit too brown for me. Weirdly, just ugly brown. But I like how it has the whole the mob stuff. It has the Batman origin stuff. It modernizes Batman and makes him just feel more new and fresh and everything. It's got a good appeal to itself that as a Batman film, I think it really works. It loses itself a bit in the final act, but at the same time, what the fuck else was Ra's al Ghul gonna do? I don't know. I still think it's pretty cool how he works with Scarecrow and like poisons the water hole and shit. Like, it's great, you know. It's got some really cool, like, even horror elements to it, especially with Scarecrow. And I've always been a fan of the ninja stuff. Let's be honest, ninjas are cool. So of course, Batman being a ninja makes sense. You know, the whole Leo Shadow stuff. But yeah, so I think this is definitely a solid film. Hence the 3.5 stars, like better than average in my opinion, and just worthy of the claim. Thing is, I don't as much. I mean, Bruce Wayne's probably, I think he's the most interesting probably in this film than he is in the sequels, to some degree. I think Batman's more interesting in the second film. I don't know, he has a lot more presence in this film as Batman, because it's the intro of him. He needs to have this fear factor. He needs to discover who he is and whatever as Batman. But he's also a ninja, so it's like, alright, sure, you know, why not? But then, of course, my next film is Batman 89. And now, Batman 89 it's not a great Batman film. I just kind of have it just a bit touch more up there because I really like Michael Keaton's Batman. Jack Nicholson is great as a portrayal of the Joker, but he's just playing Jack Nicholson if he was a crime boss and wore makeup and had silly goons. You know, he's not really the Joker, but at the same time, he's an interesting depiction of the Joker. So of course, I love it how like everyone was like, when Heath Ledger was cast, they were like, oh, but no one can beat, you know, Jack Nicholson's iconic performance. I'm like, I'm sorry, Jack Nicholson was riffing on Cesar Romero, clearly. He was like to the point that even his laugh was like mostly inspired by Romero's performance. Like everything about it. Batman 89, it's the one that suffers from the origin story stuff. Like, I don't really care much about the love interest. And Batman doesn't have too much showcasing in the film. It's a lot of it is about Jack Nicholson's character, to the point of him being literally the headliner of the movie. And I really like Michael Keaton's Batman. I like his costume. I like his presence in this one. He really goes in for presence as Batman. Like, obviously, he opens up his whole cape and everything. It looks a bit goofy. Fair enough. It still is a bit goofy. But he's still going for presence, and he's meant to be a fear factor. He's not just, I'm going to scare you with violence, I'm going to scare you with the fact that I cannot die because I've got bulletproof armor, and I am bigger in life than you are. I present an image, not just someone who can beat you up. So, yeah, the whole opening scene really introduces Batman in a pretty cool way. Also, Alfred's great. Alfred's great in all 4 of these films. I don't know if I'd put him as my favourite of the Alfreds. I don't really know what my favourite Alfred is, to be fair. Michael Caine's is pretty cool. But, I don't know, they've all got different Alfreds. Nevertheless, that's a story for another day. I'm trying to think of what else I can really say about 89. 89, again, doesn't really feel as much like a Batman film. It just feels like a crime film, and Batman's just kind of there in the background. He's not really doing too much detective stuff, but he's doing enough, like, with all the makeup, poison and stuff. Like, he figures this shit out, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but he's just there. But it's a fine film. It's not overly fantastic. I'd probably say Batman Begins is probably a better film than it, but I just really like how Batman is portrayed in Batman 89, so yeah, that just has it for me. I don't know. I should probably flip them around, realistically. Should I flip them around? Batman 89 does have a better Batmobile, and I do like Gotham more in Batman 89. Yeah. I guess I'll stick with Batman 89 then. It still has the origin story. It uses that kind of like as a twist, especially with Jack Nicholson's Joker being the actual guy who killed his parents and stuff. So, you know, it develops itself more as an actual as a solid, like, kind of mystery crime film. Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. Next up, we have, in number 7, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which I gave 4 stars. This is on my most recent viewing of the 4K of the IMAX sequences. Now, this is a very divisive movie, obviously. A lot of the Snyder films are. I've grown to really like the Snyder films a lot more over time, and not as a big Snyder fanboy. He was always good from the get-go. I'm like, no, I didn't like him to begin with, But, I really like Sucker Punch, the longer extended cut. I like Watchmen to some distinction. Prefer the comic, but still, it is what it is. I like most of his films, realistically. I do think his depiction of, with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and obviously Justice League, are pretty, artful and cinematic and whatever. And I didn't want to put in the Justice League one because I don't really consider it's not a Batman film; it's a Justice League film. So that's not on this list. So otherwise, trust me, I would have had to probably have watched the Joss Whedon one. I don't want to do that to myself again. I've already seen the film once, so I don't want to do it again. Not a good film, but I will obviously credit where credit is due. I do like the depiction of Batman in this film, and this film is more of a Batman film. He is, you've got your obviously like Dark Knight Returns version of Batman. He's much more hard-boiled. He's lost a lot, obviously from the whole Robin's costume and everything. There's the elements of Bruce Wayne as a character is really interesting. Obviously, I feel like there's a lot more Bruce Wayne than there is of Batman in this film. Maybe an equal amount. But I do like his version of Bruce Wayne. I like how he deals with shit. I like how he's like a businessman kind of first and foremost, but he's like, it's like his business and the people in his business are an extension of himself, which obviously is shown in like the opening scene. Well, not the opening scene, the opening sequence is actually, is it? I thought it started with the funeral of his parents. Yeah, that starts with a flashback of his parents, which again, a Batman origin story, which was also kind of cool. They like died after watching Excalibur. Interesting film to die from, but that's okay. It's a cool film. But I do like, I like how they use Bruce Wayne. I like how they utilize Batman. Like, they give, again, a realistic presence to the two. Batman feels like he's been through a lot, to the point that obviously he's killing people, he's branding them, he's got more of a darker psychology, which a lot of people, after seeing, the Dark Knight films, were like, oh shit, do I really like how Batman's a bit more hardcore? But it's because cinema audiences at the time hadn't, if they haven't read the Dark Knight, Returns comic, then they didn't expect, and they wouldn't have understood Batman as this dark and this dark and dude wants to kill people kind of dude. He's tired of this shit. It's definitely a film that focuses less on being a traditionally structured film and more on actually being a like examination of characters in like a realistic portrayal, but like also the factor of like, oh, you think Superman and vigilantes are evil? Well, the real evil is capitalism and how the media can completely tarnish a person's reputation. And that's like a really key theme in the film. So like to the point of even like Clark Kent looking into like Batman and being like, I don't like this guy. I want to publish like in the newspaper why this guy shouldn't be here, and he's bad. So yeah. Anyway, I think the action scenes are pretty cool too. Like it does feel a bit bloated at times, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense. I feel like obviously if they had more of a build-up over a previous film to like kind of give more backstory into how Bruce Wayne can do all this kind of stuff, then, well, not how Bruce Wayne, how Batman can be what he is in this film, then yeah, but at the same time, he's a believable force in this movie. He's a characterized force. He represents obviously a lot of stuff and has gone through a lot of shit, so yeah, it works for me. Batman doesn't have a love interest in Batman v Superman. Good. He's got Alfred, who is like, how much older is Jeremy Irons than Ben Affleck? That's like I really question that. Oh wow, he's in his 70s. Okay, well they're 23 years apart, so I guess it would make sense if Alfred was in his 30s by the time Bruce Wayne's parents were killed. Jesus. Anyway, that film has like a whole lot of stuff to like obviously delve into, but it's mostly a piece again of battling ideologies, not just what if Batman went poof. So anyway, it's a much better film than people give it credit for. Which at the same time, at times I don't like watching it, but sometimes I do. Most time I give it like 2.5 to 3 stars, but the last time I watched it, I gave it 4 because this was like 2 weeks ago. Because I just really liked it. I really dug it. I liked the mood. I liked the presentation. I don't think as a Batman film it suffers because it doesn't have a great presentation of Gotham per se. It's kind of like not really Gotham at all to some degree. I mean, it does show it to be like still modern, I guess, and grimy and like, you know, littered with like crime and shit. So I guess it is to some degree like a better modern depiction of Gotham than just what if it's New York, but if you go underneath the streets, it's homeless people. Oh, spooky, you know. Gotham, not great, in my opinion. Next up, we have number 6, The Lego Batman Movie with 4 stars. This film, again, I was debating whether I should put this one below Batman v Superman or not, but I think this one just kind of works better. Again, good Batman. I like his Bruce Wayne is like basically none. He basically does not care to be Bruce Wayne anymore. He's like embraced the fact that he's Batman. But the element of him being Bruce Wayne is important to the point of him being a surrogate father. Like, and basically like embracing some kind of form of humanity. Because this film, though made for children, is rich with like themes of family and the importance of like actually like caring for the people around you, and yeah, so it's interesting for a movie that has like a lot of villains. It's definitely about still the relationship between Batman and the Joker. Robin is great. Batman is, of course, because it's still a comedy, he has his whole, like, I'm dark and brooding, but it's all for comedic purposes. Like, it's still, like, in character of Batman. Like, everything about it is what Batman significantly is. And the film completely understands it. It's like, this is what Batman is, and we're basically going to spoof that to some degree. So, or, like, take it to a comedic overload. But again, this is also plays into the continuity that, like, every other Batman film before it, you know, it exists in this universe, which is also kind of goofy as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's there's not really too much I can say about this film outside of, you know, well animated, well acted, and stuff like that. As a Batman film, like, it still has the obvious like kind of cliche family thing where it's like, maybe my family were the people who were with me all along and that kind of shit, and make that obvious arc that he needs to overcome. But it's like, for Batman to do that is like kind of a significant thing in a way, because some people take it for granted that he just has Robin or Batgirl hanging out with him, but it's like, he doesn't just have them because they're there. They're important to him because they are extensions of him, much like Alfred is. Like, you know, even Alfred is kind of like semi-sarcastic in this film, and then even becomes, well, gets his own bat suit, you know. So the film allows Batman to explore who he is as a character and who he has been for the past like 60 to 70 years, and then to look at what he can be, what he can learn from all that, what he can evolve into, yeah, it's pretty goofy. Obviously, it's very forceful, breaking to the element of being completely like knowledgeable of previous endeavors of Batman, to the point of like, Batman's been around since the 60s, and then obviously Bruce Wayne being like, yeah, and he still looks great, you know, because it's all a gag. I think it's just a bit of a better film to Batman v Superman for the factor of it has just a solid like 3-act structure. It's more about Batman. So in this case, I think because well, of course it's more about Batman. It literally has his name in the title. But, you know, it also has great gags. It has fun characters. It has good voice actors. Like, even Zoe Kravitz is still Catwoman. And she just meows a lot. It's great, you know. It's a good film. I enjoyed it. I would like some kind of a sequel, but it's also like, I don't know what the fuck else they could really... Like, there's a lot of different stuff they could do, but as a, you know, kind of Deadpool-inspired film, even though I'm pretty sure it came out the same year as Well, it came out the year after Deadpool, but like, it has that self-referential element to itself and everything. But I think it works because it's still in character. It's not just, hey, let's point and make fun of ourselves. It's actually, let's utilize this to build character and to explore our character's journey and everything, and to make him realize like why his life choices have like kind of ruined his perspectives and stuff. So especially when it comes to friends and family, like, oh, he might have the Justice League at his back, but they're not his friends. He doesn't get invited to their parties and stuff. So anyway, next up we have, and this is like the monolith one, which a lot of people praise as like the best Batman film, The Dark Knight, which I do regardless give it 5 stars because I just fucking love the film. But as a solid modern crime film, works really well. As a Batman film, it still has a lot of good touches. Again, Batman is pretty good. He's good at like upgrading himself and his suit and everything, which is always cool. But as a character, you reflect more onto Bruce Wayne than you do onto Batman. Like, there's not really much of a Bruce Wayne having issues with the ideology of anything outside of just, Batman having the ideology of anything outside of just the pure chaos of the Joker. And you can't really combat that anyway. Like, he doesn't really know how to some degree. He can't kill the guy because then the guy would win, but he can't reveal himself because then the guy would win, There's obviously that main ideology in the film, like, you live, you can die the hero or live long enough to become the villain, which it becomes to some degree kind of a reflection of Batman, but more realistically about Two-Face himself. But again, Two-Face and the Joker are both great in the film. Dark Knight's a tricky one, because again, it's a really well-made film. Batman's great in it. Joker's great in it. Like, everything about the film is great. I don't think Gotham per se is a particularly great Gotham, but sometimes it depends, because sure, it's more modernized and everything. It's hey, what if Gotham was simply just New York City, and it's about the people, so even the people of Gotham feel like they're people of Gotham. It's definitely an interesting film in that regard, but it's definitely more about the Gotham having a white knight and everything, and making sure they can get rid of crime. There's not really much I can criticize about this film. In terms of as a Batman film, Batman's not really a detective. He's just using advanced tech to try and find the Joker. And it's meant to be obviously a reflection of like this is the NSA or whatever, that the American thing to try and... It's National Security Agency, I think it was. That was like, they're tracking people through their phones and everything because they're trying to find the terrorists and stuff. So it's a lot of that comes more into it. But I like the look of the film. I like the feel of it. It has pacing and everything. It's great. Like, as a film, it's just great. It's always fun to watch. The Joker is just... Heath Ledger's fucking brilliant. So, yeah, it's one of those films that benefits. It doesn't benefit as much as a Batman film, but it utilizes enough of what it has, from characters to basically everything. I think it works. But it's not, in my opinion, the best Batman film. In number 4 spot, we've got The Batman, the 2022 film. I gave this one 4 stars. I've now watched it twice, which is great. This one I really like, this version of Gotham. I've always liked the Gothic version of Gotham. If Gotham as a city has to have a feel, it's got to be Gothic. And even the people usually have to be desperate. Like, crime is rampant, and even with Batman around, it's like... Yeah, but I'll probably get mugged at any fucking corner, in any alleyway, so it's more or less you're trying to just make do with what you got, Crime is like a side hassle for most people because they're too scared to actually become like a rich elite that's going to get killed or kidnapped because they're walking from the opera or some movie like Finding Nemo or something. I don't know. I don't like those theories of like, oh, maybe Batman's parents were watching this movie when they got killed. At least in Batman Begins, they went to the fucking opera. Anyway, I really like this film. I like the Riddler. I like how he's portrayed. Again, a very modernistic take, a very Zodiac killer take, which is distinctly different to Jim Carrey's version and even the version from the 1966 film. I like this version of Batman. I even like how Bruce Wayne, though being in like very short of a runtime, is like, when he's there, he's just doing the Batman stuff. He's this, you know, he's this loner goth dude who doesn't respect his elder, this being his butler, his Alfred. And, you know, obviously it comes to allow him to realise, at least by the end of the film, especially with how hurt Alfred gets, that, you know, there are people in his life who can be hurt because of his actions, because of what he does. But in this case, it was completely incidental. But at the same time, there was obviously the tarnishing of his family legacy. So, yeah, that wasn't even his fault, which is even more amusing. Catwoman is great. Penguin is great. Falcone, it's all good. I like it. It's still heavy on the mob stuff. It's still heavy on the crime detective film. The detective part's great. I love Gordon in these films. Like, Gordon's good in the Dark Knight films. You know, Gary Oldman's great. And he's basically, because he's the guy who still trusts Batman no matter what. But, you know, I think this is a nicer, a better depiction of Gordon to some degree. You know, he's not the commissioner yet, he's not the great detective that he can be, but he at least is willing to work with Batman to figure shit out, because he knows Batman is not corrupt, you know, and Batman knows that he is not corrupt. And there's just an element of they're both seeking the same form of justice, so the best thing to do is for them to work together, so it makes for a great buddy cop film. Yeah, and I just really like Gotham too. It rains. It rains a lot. Batmobile's cool. I don't like the Batmobile in the Dark Knight films. It was cool for the day because it was a tank, you know. But like, even Batman and Robin had a better Batmobile in my opinion. I just like when it has a more classic design. In this case, what if it's just a really cool, fast car? And I'm like, I'm down for that. That works for me. You know, like, even the Batmobile and Batman v Superman is still pretty neat. There's not much of it, unfortunately, which is kind of weird. Like, they really do not utilize the Batmobile in that film very often. But it's still fine, you know. Then we have Batman 66. This one is a personal... I mean, the next three are all personal. Or the next two are personal favourites. My personal favourite two of the Batman films. In fact, I'd probably say all of these ones have been personal favourites. I really like Lego Batman and The Dark Knight and the Batman, and Batman 66. Batman 66, I give it 4 stars. It's always a romp. I love the Adam West Batmans. Like, there is a realistic part where you realise that even in the cartoons and the comics, Batman was like this at some stage. You know, and he's still fighting crime. It's just, you know, with pals and zooms and all that crazy crap. I like him and Robin. They're always fun hanging out. They got dumb as shit and I love it. Like, this is basically like a better version of Batman and Robin, because it just is. Like, the characters, everything's cartoony about it, so everything's appropriate. Everything's hilarious. For most people, this is just a classic film. A lot of people don't regard it. I don't think a lot of more people regard it very highly as a Batman film. But at the same time, I think most of those people are too much into Batman's gritty and dark. I'm like, I mean, yeah, he is, but he doesn't always have to be. You know, there comes to a point where you realize that Batman doesn't always have to be exploring his trauma. Maybe he just wants to save the docks from a bomb. And there's a nun in the way, and then there's a baby in a pram, and then there's a bunch of fishermen, and then there's people on the water, you know, and then there's some ducklings. It's classic. There's not really much I can say about this film in terms of exploring it as an actual Batman film, because it just is. It's a good thing, and I like too how, like, it's the whole plot is like basically a MacGuffin of just, like, the main 4 bad guys, being the Joker, the Riddler, the Penguin, and Catwoman, all trying to, like, ruin peace talks and make the world go into more chaos than it already is. So, yeah, it's interesting. Nevertheless, the next film we have is Batman Returns. Batman Returns is my favourite live-action Batman film. I love Batman. And Batman and him as Bruce Wayne get a lot more, you know, showcase in this film. it just works a lot better for me. I like the gothic, the dark approach. It's kind of a really fucked up movie as well. Like, I mean, Catwoman's great, but she is still a woman who gets pushed out of a window. But Michelle Pfeiffer is fantastic. And then, of course, you've got Danny DeVito as the Penguin, who also is brilliant, you know? And even Christopher Walken's there. It's just like, what the fuck is happening with this casting? It's great. It's just one of those films that, for me, obviously the villains are really great, but I think even, like, visually, the iconography, the Batmobile, like, just the way that they shoot it and depict it, the way it looks, it's great. And I really like Batman. And I like how instead of his love interest being someone who explores his, as Batman, as Bruce Wayne's backstory, it's also like, hey, what if Bruce Wayne was actually kind of more interesting because he wants to fuck Selena Kyle, you know? It's great. I can relate to that. She's hot, you know, and she's kooky. But yeah, it's just a fun hell. It's a hell of a ride. I've always loved this film, even as a kid, where people were like, "It's too scary for children." I'm like, "The hell are you talking about? This shit's great," you know. So it's a banger of a film. It explores Batman's like his relationship with Catwoman, especially, is great. Like, because he still has that whole thing of like, is being Bruce Wayne really worth it? Is it, you know? Especially in regards to like love interest kind of stuff. Not in terms of am I causing too much crime in the city. No, crime is appearing and he's there to stop it. It's different. So yeah, last but not least, of course, we do have Mask of the Phantasm, which I think is the best Batman film. It's a film that showcases Batman in his like midlife. Showing where, what he's currently dealing with when it comes to having dealt with a lot of villains from the animated series, but then also, like, it reflects back on his origins and his past, and like how his origin with his parents dying affected him. Like, I don't really know how much of that is explored in the animated series. I've seen a good handful of the episodes, but I don't think it ever really came up. So in the movie, they bring it in, like, hey, look, it's his parents, but again, it's not about his parents. That's just his conflict with him, you know, and trying to figure out if he should be Batman, because that was like an early thing in his life where he wants to fight crime, like, but he doesn't really know what to do and how to do it and how to take care of it. And then, of course, you've got the love interest, who again is a good reflection of who he used to be and now who he is as Batman. And of course, if you don't know the twist already, she is the villain, which is kind of like the red herring. The red herring's, I think her dad is the villain, the Phantasm, but no, it's her. But then, of course, they're like, oh yeah, but you thought that was a pretty cool twist. How about the Joker also shows up because he's one of the main reasons why her father died. So then they just bring in the Joker, of course, played by Mark Hamill. Fantastic. It's just a banger of a film. It has the great visual style of the animated series, which I always think is probably one of the best visual styles for Batman. Obviously the guy who voices Batman is great. You've got, again, a good dynamic of Bruce Wayne, because you're looking at him in his early romantic days to the point that he was about to get married to this woman, and then contrast to his later days where he's, again, more dark and brooding. He's dealt with a lot of shit. You know, he's had to fight a lot of people to get to where he is now. And for him, it's just kind of a down-the-job kind of deal, but now someone's framing Batman, and he's got to, like, well, I got to clear my name, because despite how many villains I've put into prison, people think I'm crazy enough that I'm going to break out and just start killing people on my own terms. So, yeah, it's just a solid flick. So I definitely recommend it. I think because it's just, like, it's basically a better version of Batman Begins in a way. It's a better version of a lot of those films where it has to reflect on his origin. I'd say maybe a better version of Batman 89 to some degree. More entertaining, the villain's more interesting, more elusive, the Joker is there, which makes it even better. And he's like latter half of the film, so you don't even know he's going to show up until he just does. And Batman actually does detective stuff, which again, he does in The Batman, but he does proper like detective stuff, but it's also about him as a character, you know? It's exploring him, and they're trying to figure out who he is and if from where he's come from as a younger man who has this anger in him and he just wants to, stop crime, to, hey, I'm now Batman, and was this a good path for me, you know? And he's able to reflect on that by literally the same love interest who knew him before Batman and now him as Batman. She obviously figures out that he's Batman, and it comes to that question of, is he in a good position? Has he done the right thing? So, yeah, it's good shit. And that's all basically for now. I'll probably film on a later day because my camera is almost dead. And I kind of want to write something of a script in a way to kind of figure out what I think allows for a good Batman film in terms of all the things I mentioned at the start of the video. But there's a lot of things. Most of this is personal preference. Like, what do I prefer as a Batman film? Like, I've still only seen Mask of the Phantasm once, but I remember it quite well. I mean, I only watched it like 3 months ago, and it's just such a striking film to me. But yeah, obviously let me know in the comments what your favorite Batman film is or what your ranking of them are. You can include all the animated features that I didn't mention or any other features I didn't mention. If you disagree with my opinion, it doesn't matter. It's Batman. The perks of Batman is that there are so many different styles of films and like TV shows and all kinds of stuff when it comes to Batman, from original comics to what we get nowadays, that there's all these different variations of him, and I think that that's really cool. And the fact that even movies depict him differently each time, for the most part, like, sure, it can be confusing for an audience, but hey, it allows you to be like, I like this Batman more than I like this Batman, but I like this Bruce Wayne more than I like this Bruce Wayne. I like this Batmobile more than I like this Batmobile, and you go from there. So, I mean, I can say I really like Batman because I've even got the Lego Batmobile from '89 and '66 as Lego. Plus a Mezco figurine of Batman because I like Batman. I've got all the films, so yeah. I don't know. I don't really need to prove a lot of like dedication. Like, I've got life-size statues of Batman. No, look, it is what it is. Like, there's even the element of like, what Bat costume do I prefer? And to most degree, I'd say either the Dark Knight or the Batman. Like, I like when it's armorish, but he can also move his head, and he doesn't have to go like, whoa. Because that's a really annoying thing to watch in the 90s films, like, when, especially that clip of Batman Forever, where he goes to do this for Commissioner Gordon, and he has to turn his whole body and go like that. It's painful. Nevertheless, like, how do they not fix it over 4 films? Anyway, that's all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Might do a Batman, makes a good Batman film video. We'll see. Adios.